Hello and welcome to The Take. I'm your host, Chesley McNeil. Each weekday, we're looking at stories, making headlines, and bringing experts from our community to give their take. Here's a look back at some of the top takes from this week and how those in the know are seeing those stories that impact you. All right, a major tech industry is increasingly calling Georgia home, but new sites pose their own challenges to our natural resources. 11Alive investigative reporter Zach Merchant joins us now with a look ahead at his latest investigation published today. And so, Zach, what are you talking about here?
Look, we're talking about tech and the data centers that power them. We're talking about the cloud, all of this stuff that if you're anything like me, you hear about a lot, but maybe you don't fully, entirely understand, but it has a real world impact. Here's an example of what we're talking about. So everybody essentially knows what this is. It's a smartphone. So many of us use this. We take it for granted. One expert we talked to, though, said that when you're using a device like this, it's really a very good screen, but most of the actual computing that is happening behind the scenes when you use any app on a phone like this, that's happening at a remote location. Used to be called a server farm. Now they're known as data centers, and they have some real positive benefits in the world. They let us use these smartphones and other modern technology, but they have real world implications, particularly for our natural resources as well.
So, Zach, where are these data centers?
Well, they're all over the state of Georgia, and more are trying to come here. And this is one of those things, they're kind of hiding in plain sight. You saw a little bit of the video on the screen there. I got a chance to see them up close for the first time in my life. They're enormous. They look like massive warehouses. One industry advocate, his name is Dan Diorio, he works at the Data Center Coalition. We interviewed him for the story. He said, a rough estimate, there are at least 100 data centers in Georgia, either online right now or in active development, and that was just an estimate. We did our own research. We looked at state filings in the state of Georgia that are required when a company wants to build a major project. Reviewing those state filings just for the last year, so from 2024 to today, showed 25 more proposed data centers could be on the way, and they're popping up in places like Douglas County. There's proposals for some in Monroe County. There are proposals for spots all across the metro and the state as a whole.
Yeah, why does this matter? Tell us why this matters.
Well, a lot of reasons. The big one, to run these things, it takes a lot of resources. We talk about all the good things you get from a data center. You get to use your phone, you get to use modern technology. That is great, no one's disputing that. But to make it all happen, it takes a lot of resources to run these data centers. In particular, we're talking about power and water. And for this report, we are focusing in on the water impact. Professor Ramnath Chalapa over at Emory's Goizueta Business School, he estimates that just one large data center takes about 200 million gallons of water to operate each year. And according to one Environmental Protection Agency estimate, that's the equivalent of about 2,000 homes. And you remember I mentioned a moment ago too, we uncovered about 25 proposals to put new data center projects in Georgia. One of the requirements when you're filing that paperwork is to put an estimated water usage into that proposal. We tallied it all up. If all of those proposed data centers are built, they will use more than 5 billion gallons of water each year.
Wow. Do you know what's driving up the growth here?
Yeah, one word, AI. And maybe that's an acronym for two words, artificial intelligence, but the sentiment is the same. It is enormously computing intensive as an operation. It's, Professor Chalapa said, it's sort of an order of magnitude or more intensive than past smartphone and other tech revolutions. It creates enormous demand for the data centers because they are doing that computing to power AI. Professor Chalapa, to be clear, he said this is an element of the modern world that's not going back. You can't unring the bell. He said the genie is out of the bottle now. But the challenge, he said, and the challenge for everybody in the state and everybody in the tech industry is finding that balance, right? That balance between growth of an important modern technology and the needs of making sure that Georgia's natural resources are taken care of. That's the crux of this story.
Especially water, right? We need that. We need that.
Yes,
right?
we do.
Absolutely. All right, Zach Merchant, really appreciate that report. Thanks for sharing that with us. It seems one of the smartest things to do is stick to a budget. Wallet Hub ranked more than 2,800 counties in the United States. It used two key dimensions: savings, finance access, and debt and delinquencies. And it seems people here in Metro Atlanta vary on how well they are with their pocketbooks. Forsyth County ranks the highest at 30th in the nation and is only one in the top 100. The four major Metro Atlanta counties, Cobb ranks the best, Of all 5, they're in the bottom half of the survey. Joining us now is Usha Ratcliffe, Associate Professor of the Practice of Accounting at Emory. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Professor Ratcliffe, you hear these numbers. What's your initial take?
Well, it's not unexpected. A budget is hard to do and harder still to stick with, just because, our wants and needs always seem to exceed what we have.
You heard the numbers there. Forsyth County, including Cumming and borders with Alpharetta and Johns Creek. Is there something unique about that area right there which allows for good budgeting?
Certainly, yes, because, obviously the more income you have, the better position you're going to be by way of an emergency fund and not defaulting on debt and loans and things like that. So you're better positioned, but it really doesn't matter how much money you make, because you can be making $100,000, but if you're spending $110,000, that's a problem, right? So
Absolutely.
it could happen at all income levels.
Gotcha. On the flip side of that, it seems like counties that are closer to the metro area are down. Why is that?
Well, obviously inflation has been a problem. Everything is costing a lot more money. Traditional rules of budgeting would say, spend 50% of what you bring home on needs, right? On non-discretionary things. But the prices of all that is going up. So that percentage is going up. So it kind of squeezes what you have and what you have available by way of an emergency fund and things like that.
I was just talking to my 2 sons yesterday about budgeting, and they seem to make it seem like it's such a hard thing to do. Is it really that hard in this economy?
It can be hard. Of course, it can be hard because it depends on how much you have and how much you need to budget for all the various things that you want to do. But I think it's a beautiful tool. A budget can be an amazing thing to do because it's a financial plan. It aligns your spending with your priorities. So that's the good thing. It can also put you in control of your finances and kind of, put you in the driver's seat. When it's done well and it's done right, I think it's fantastic. So I think everybody should obviously, attempt to do a budget.
That's absolutely right. I agree with you. Now, are there any tips that you can give my sons and others out there watching that's having a hard time with this?
Most certainly. So here's what I would do. To get started, here's what I would do. I would look at the last 3 months of spending, whether it's in a credit card, your bank statement, whatever it is. Where is your money going? And that's always very enlightening. We're always shocked to see, oh my gosh, this is how much we spend on takeout and food delivery and that sort of thing. Who knew, right? So I think it's very important, first of all, to take stock of how much money is coming in and where the money is going. And then to ask yourself, is this where we want our money to go? So then you start to make a list. Here's what we're getting in, and then here's where we think we should spend the money. And that is an amazing start. That is kind of like the 50, 30, 20% rule, where 50% goes on all the needs that we have. 30% is on the wants, which is, entertainment and food and other things that we have. And then 20% on savings. 20% on savings is so important for everyone, to sort of keep track of. There are different types of budgeting. That's one way of doing it. The other extreme is like a zero-based budgeting, where every dollar is assigned a purpose. But, budgeting is hard to stick to, I think, for a lot of people because it's like a diet, right? So a diet implies a constraint, and who wants to feel constrained? So that is the challenge that I think, people often have when it comes to sticking to a budget. You can have a plan, but how well you stick to it depends on your orientation and can you in fact do it. And there are, ways to think about budgeting as well.
Professor Ratcliffe, really appreciate that. You've helped a lot of people out today. Really appreciate that. All right, imagine getting a call from your loved one, terrified, desperate, begging for help. But what if the voice wasn't real? Scammers are now using powerful AI voice cloning apps to steal voices or mimic someone you trust and use them to pull off these convincing scams. Here now to help us get through this terrifying scam is Derek Kravitz. He's the investigative journalist for the Consumer Reports covering digital marketplace. And Derek, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Derek, how scary is this? I mean, to get a call from somebody that you think is a loved one or somebody that you know or trust and being hacked by them, really.
It's scary. I mean, if you're getting a call from someone saying, hey, I need money, I'm a loved one, I'm a friend, I'm someone else in your life, send it to me right away. Your immediate reaction sometimes is yes, I will get you the money as quickly as possible. But the key thing is to calm down, slow down, make sure that who you're talking to is actually who they say they are.
As these apps, these AI apps are getting a little bit more inexpensive, I guess anybody can use them. How powerful are they as far as mimicking your voice? Can you maybe listen and tell that it's not a real person at all?
I had my own voice cloned by one of the leading companies that detects these type of voice clones called Reality Defender.
Mm-hmm.
It is eerily similar.
Wow.
They are getting better and better. And even in the last 3 years, they've come a very long way in terms of mimicking the cadence of your voice, pauses, those little ums and ahs in between when you're talking. So they are very, very good and they're very, very believable. And all they need are 3 seconds of voice from a YouTube video or Instagram reel or something like that to do a very convincing deepfake.
Wow. Are they expensive?
No, these are all mostly free apps.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to have a premium account, a certain subscription in order to access the better features. But generally speaking, they're very, very cheap or free apps, open source, and for hackers, you can go ahead and jailbreak them and use kits in order to access all the features.
Wow. Can they mimic emotion as well?
Yeah, increasingly when you actually use a lot of these more sophisticated or newer apps, they can mimic intonation and emotion in a very realistic way. They can seem excited or angry or fearful. And those are things that really register to people when they're listening.
Wow, heartbreaking. Take us through the steps that we need to avoid when the phone rings and we hear a voice on the other end that we think is a real person.
The first thing is to just calm down and slow down, right? Whenever someone asks you for something like money or say login credentials to your bank account or personal info like your social security number, your date of birth, those are all flags, yellow flags or even red flags that you need to take a step and figure out if the person you're talking to is who they say they are. Second thing is, just generally speaking, never give any information to anyone else by phone, email, text that is sensitive, like your password, you say a security code to your bank account, things like that, even if they seem like they are calling from, say, a bank or say a government agency like the IRS. That's a sign that you need to take a step and maybe call them back, right? Go ahead and check out online whether that person is who they say they are. The first thing is always use two-step authentication if you can on your bank accounts. So that means going into your mobile app on your phone and instituting a second-tier security feature so that when you try to log in, they send you a security code, say a 3 or 4-digit code, and you have to insert that on either your phone or by email. And that way, there's an extra layer of security. And usually those type of things help in the long run when people are trying to access your account illegally.
Quickly, you mentioned getting their voice off of Facebook or some type of social media. Can they get it off the phone as well? Like when you talk on the phone, because your phone is recording you, right?
Yeah, any source in 3 seconds, so that's not very long. So even a voicemail or, a very quick conversation, those are all really good ways in which bad actors can take your voice and use it for bad means.
Oh, wow. All right, Derek Kravitz with Consumer Reports. Really appreciate that report and warning us of this scam. This is crazy.
Thank you.
Well, earlier this month, several states to our north dealt with unrelenting downpours, swelling rivers to near record levels across the state. The flooding was so bad in Kentucky that a unit from Georgia's Search and Rescue Task Force was sent up there to help people survive and get to safety. Here now, joining us on the take is Lieutenant Bruce Jones with the Paulding County Fire Rescue. Welcome to the show, Lieutenant Jones.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, talk about being called out of state for service. What's the logistics like for that?
Well, pretty much on April 4th, Georgia Search and Rescue Task Force 6, we received the call to go to Kentucky and aid the citizens there in their time of need with the rising flood waters. So pretty much myself and 5 other amazing Paulding County firemen rendezvoused with the rest of our team, 26 members in total. And from there, we traveled in convoy to Bardstown, Kentucky, along with 12 vehicles, 5 boats, and 3 UTVs, and to aid.
Yeah. How were you guys picked? Are you the closest to that area from there?
No, sir. So actually, majority of us run west to northwest Georgia. And then this was actually our first time as a team to travel out of state for a deployment.
How far can you be sent? I mean, could you go as far as California, or is there a certain area that you kind of stick to?
Well, it depends on the request. Normally, we operate in the state of Georgia. So like I said, this was our first time requested by FEMA to travel.
Yeah, we saw the pictures, all right? We saw the video up there. How you got a first view of it. How shocked were you when you saw it?
It was the first time I had ever seen anything like that. This was my first big deployment like this. It was devastating. It was heartbreaking to see people's homes in destruction like that. But I tell you, the people of Kentucky are very resilient. It was very heartwarming to see them come together and help us and help each other. So it was great.
I was going to ask you that. They probably were ecstatic to see you come in. I was going to say, how were you guys received?
Met with great generosity. It was like something I'd never seen before. Just open arms. Very grateful.
Was there one moment that amazed you more than another?
There was multiple. I will say there was one gentleman that helped us when we were in Greenville, Kentucky. He had his own little John boat. He was born and raised on the river, and he helped us day in and day out search isolated areas and help bring people to safety. So that was amazing. Give
us some clue of how high that water was. Like if you compare it to houses, was it second level? Was it over the tops of houses?
I'm sorry. Yeah, so it varied in areas. Obviously, closer to the major rivers, there were some areas that were over my head. So it just varied in location. But definitely with some homes, there was water at the ground level all the way up to the roof line.
Wow. And I guess the flooding is still taking place there. Would you be called back, or could you be called back?
I mean, we could be. It just depends on their needs and depends on any kind of incoming weather. There's always that possibility, but I tell you, the local EMA and fire services there, that very well equipped, and they do a great job as well.
Can you give us any takeaways if we ever in a situation like that where our home or where water kind of overtakes the home? What should we do as we wait for you guys to come get us?
So the biggest thing is act early. Don't wait. I know we can be very prideful and we don't want to leave our homes, don't want to leave our property, but listen to the people around you, the authorities giving you advice on what to do. Leave early. Get out early. Don't risk it.
Do you consider yourself a hero?
No, not at all. I'm just, I'm able to do what I love. I'm thankful to be part of such a great organization, representing a wonderful county. I love Paulding County Fire. I love Paulding County and just love the people I work with. So I'm not a hero, just doing what I love to do.
Well, Bruce, you are to us, okay? You're our hero. And
Thank you.
And you're wearing your cape right now. I see it there. Bruce Jones, Paulding County Fire and Rescue, thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you so much.
Today. All right. New battles emerging over federal funding. This week, the Trump administration plans to send a request to Congress to rescind $1.1 billion for public broadcasting. If approved, that could eliminate almost all federal funding for NPR and PBS. Meanwhile, Harvard University was hit with a $2 billion funding freeze after rejecting demands from the Trump administration that could make sweeping changes. The school received a letter sent by multiple federal agencies late Friday calling for Harvard to change everything from admissions to hiring practices to academic programs. And now plans to commemorate the nation's 250th anniversary next year could be at risk as it's significantly scaled back, if not canceled, or the federal funding is completely cut altogether. Joining us now is Mary Wern. She is the president of Georgia Humanities. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's talk about the special, how special it is for America to celebrate 250 years, its 250th birthday. How large is this undertaking, first of all?
Well, I think it's very important across the country, but particularly to the state of Georgia. It's an original colony, and the fact that we had plans in place to really take this for a moment of reflection, to contemplate where we've been as a country and where we want to go as a country moving forward. So I think it was really set up to be a moment for contemplation and commemoration. And unfortunately, the plans that we had at Georgia Humanities to develop programming is at risk, and I don't know if we'll be able to move forward.
Wow. How much are we talking about when we talk about cuts? How much are we looking at?
Well, our budget was cut, and when I say cut, it was cut immediately. We had access to $740,000 for the first 6 months of the year, and we were anticipating another $633,000 for the remainder of the year. And we get our budgets year by year. So in terms of planning for the next year, we were going to get a whole nother budget. We were anticipating over $1 million for that.
Wow. Talk to us about how much that money is planned for, or what are you planning that money for?
Well, in terms of the 250th, we had quite a lineup. We were going to have a speakers bureau so that local communities could have speakers come and talk in their communities about historical events and also looking into the future. We had planned on, in addition to a speaker bureau, having a grants program so that communities could come to us for funding for their celebrations. It's very unlikely we're going to be able to do that. We were working with Georgia Public Library Service to develop a digital book initiative so that there would be sort of a reading club, a digital reading club with speakers coming in across the state. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. And probably the biggest event that we were looking at, that we were really looking forward to, was bringing in Smithsonian's Museum on Main Street. There is an exhibit called Voices and Votes, Democracy in America, and we were going to take that beautiful Smithsonian exhibit to 6 rural communities across the state of Georgia to commemorate and celebrate the 250th. And that's in jeopardy and unlikely to happen at this point.
Wow. Was this a shock to you guys, or did you get some early warning that this may be coming down the pipe?
Well, we knew there was a new administration. We knew there was likely to be changes. We did not expect for our budget to be entirely cut. And it really puts us in a bind because the way the budget works, we basically get refunded for the work that we do rather than having the money in a bank account somewhere. So things that we've paid for, we don't have federal funding for anymore. We have a very big event coming up on April 26th. We have the Georgia the History Day, National History Day, Georgia in LaGrange. And that programming was put in place a long time ago, but now we don't have any federal funds to fund that. We're going to have to eat into our reserves to fund that. So it's very upsetting because the things we have planned, we no longer have federal funding for those things.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, does it change anything that you currently do? And you had mentioned that right there. How is there any way that the public can help you out with this?
Well, certainly we're looking to philanthropy to help us. We're looking to the public for citizens to contact their legislators. We've been in contact with all of our legislators, but if you care about the programming that we do, and we do so much specifically for K-12, but also programming across the state in the humanities, we fund grants, we fund all kinds of programming. If you care about those things, you really want to reach out to your legislators and let them know how much you care about those things and that you don't want them to go away. We feel that our work really connects people across the state in a time when our communities are sometimes polarized. We are a connector. We're the ones who get people talking in a civilized manner and get people civically engaged. And with us not being there to make those connections, I really think it's going to hurt the state of Georgia.
Wow. Mary Wern, President of Georgia Humanities, really appreciate you coming on and sharing us that insight with us today. Folks, you just can't avoid it. Getting around in Metro Atlanta means you're likely going to spend time in traffic. And yeah, there's a new breakdown showing how much that traffic is wearing down our vehicles. Yelp has put out the first ever auto report uncovering the 25 toughest cities for car upkeep. It found Atlanta ranked second overall, with Chicago taking the top spot, followed by Philadelphia and Detroit. Joining us now is Tara Lewis, Vice President of Community Expansion and Trends for Yelp. Tara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, what's behind you guys wanting to do this report?
Well, at Yelp, we know that car ownership is a big part of everyday life for millions of people, whether they're looking to buy a used car or find a trustworthy mechanic or just dealing with unexpected repairs. We know that drivers are turning to Yelp more than ever to make informed decisions. So for our very first ever auto report, we took a look at key trends we're seeing across the country everything from the top 25 cities for vehicle upkeep to the 15 most common car problems in the U.S., as well as also releasing a list of our 100 most trusted mechanics on Yelp from across the country.
All right, so I looked at this list, and I got to ask you, is it about traffic, or is it traffic and infrastructure? Because Atlanta is the only southern city in the top 5.
Yeah, well, with sprawling highways and some challenging road conditions, car upkeep can be pretty tough in cities like Atlanta. The city ranked #1 in the country for vehicle overheating searches.
Oh, wow.
It also ranked in the top 10 for searches related to collision repair, bumper replacement, wheel and rim repair, as well as towing services. But that's not the only thing. It's also known for its fresh rides. We noticed that we saw it was number 18 out of 20 in terms of searches for car washes, detailing services, stereo installations, as well as paint services. So yes, upkeep is a big piece of it, but also folks in Atlanta are keeping their rides pretty fresh as well.
Yeah, you also dove into some other areas of this report. Was that the things you were mentioning right there?
I'm sorry, say that again?
The other areas that you dove into as far as this report goes, as far as the upkeep of your car, was that some of the things you mentioned right there as far as what people are searching for?
Yes, in terms of the top 10 toughest cities for upkeep, that was more about the upkeep that's going on, the searches for collision repair, bumper repair, but we also saw folks in Atlanta are really, they care quite a bit about keeping the aesthetics of their car looking great, whether it's an older car or a new car.
That's absolutely right. We got to drive in style around here. Well, are there any surprises in the report?
I think that it was indicative of, what consumers are thinking about right now with the unknowns related to car costs and upkeeps and potential tariffs on car parts. We saw used car searches are up 60% on Yelp. We also saw that car loan searches were up 17%. So people are thinking about different financing options if they are seeking out a new car. Also, auto mechanic searches in general are up 11%. So those all correlate in terms of folks looking to different ways to invest in their current vehicle. And also, we're on the cusp of road trip season, and people want to make sure that if they're going on vacation, that they are having a car that's safe and reliable to have their vacation.
Does volume play a role in this at all? I do know that here in a southern city like Atlanta, there's a lot of people on the roads driving, where opposed to a city like New York City, which I would think would be the roughest, a lot of people take public transportation. Does that play a role in this study at all?
Well, we based it off of search terms, and so that would correlate and make sense about what people are actually searching. Mm-hmm. The toughest cities, when you look at the top 3 for upkeep, Chicago, Atlanta, Philadelphia, I think that those are a little bit heavier when it comes to driving. They have great public transit options as well, but quite a few car owners on that. We did notice that when it comes to fresh rides, there was a little bit more representation across other cities, but yeah, I think that is a correlation why New York would not be on that in terms of searches.
Gotcha. Tara, where do you drive? Where are you from?
I live in D.C. and I also have a car here. And there's a lot of potholes, let me tell you.
But DC didn't make the list, right? Didn't make the top 20 at least, right?
We didn't, but we also have great public transportation options as well. It's also considered a walkable city. So those are probably other factors that are going into what people are searching.
Have you ever driven in Atlanta before?
I've taken many ride shares and driven with people in Atlanta. I haven't done too much driving in Atlanta myself, but I enjoy the city. And I just appreciate that folks in Atlanta are keeping their car fresh and also being safe on the road as well. Yeah,
and now that we know we make this list, in fact, number 2, we're going to be changing some things. So come check us out in a year or so. We'll be better. All right?
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Tara Lewis, president of the Community Expansion and Trends for Yelp. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you.
So much for having me.
11Alive's investigative reporter Liza Lucas joins us now to talk about her story, her latest story. And Liza, you're revealing how thieves are targeting more than just your letters, right? They're going after something a little bit more valuable.
Exactly, Chesley. Mail theft, it's long been an issue. A lot of people familiar with this, a lot of headlines. Thieves try to steal stolen checks. They wash those checks to commit fraud, right? And then they cash in. But the way that they are stealing those checks has shifted in the past few years. Now, criminals are going after a big catch, basically trying to get their hands on what's called an arrow key.
An arrow key. Okay, so is that like a universal key? Is that what it is?
Exactly. We're talking about a master key here that traditionally unlocks collection boxes or community mailboxes, those apartment boxes. For example, sometimes unlocking entire zip codes. Now, I had a chance to sit down and talk with David Maimon. He's an expert right here in our backyard at Georgia State University. He's a specialist in cyber security and criminologist, and he has been tracking check fraud on the dark web for years now. He explains how the keys open up incredible access for these criminals.
When we first started working on the issue of check fraud, we tried to figure out where do these criminals get the keys from? And we realized quite quickly that they're robbing the mail carriers for the arrow keys. The arrow keys are those keys which open the collection boxes, but the interesting thing about those keys is that each key can open hundreds of mailboxes in specific zip codes. And so all you have to have as a criminal is just one key, and then you have access to hundreds of thousands of envelopes.
So, Liza, at first what I was thinking was that we're doing this online or something like that, but he's saying that they're robbing mail carriers for that particular key. So now we're talking about more than just safety of the mail here, right?
That's right. We're talking about mail safety. We're talking about personnel safety, the people that are in charge of delivering the mail, that are out on the streets every day just trying to do this job that so many of us are dependent on. So when we talk about this, the Postal Inspection Service, they are really the law enforcement arm of USPS, if you're not familiar. They actually rolled out a new safety plan a couple years back because more and more carriers were getting robbed. I think it was like an 845% increase in robberies, which is pretty scary to think about. Now, the agency feels that some of those safety changes that they implemented, that they're working because the number of robberies dropped last year. But we found the number of stolen keys continues to go up. So what's going on here? Maimon is also seeing more keys show up for sale on the black market. Take a listen.
When we first saw those arrow keys being offered for sale in 2023, arrow keys were offered for prices ranging from $1,000 to $7,000, depending on the zip code and the number of collection boxes that you can open with it. Now we're seeing way more keys than we've seen in 2023, and the prices are lower. Now keys will go for between $1,000 to $2,500, depending on the location. Which speaks volume to the fact that these guys are able to create replicas of those arrow keys and then simply selling those in cheaper prices.
So if you're following right there, basically he's saying he's seeing more and more keys show up for sale on the dark web, despite the number of robberies of the carriers going down. And that's what we saw play out in our data as well. We're going to dive into those numbers in our story, but Maimon basically acknowledged that there's a lot that law enforcement is likely doing to tackle this issue. Obviously a huge issue, not just in Georgia, across the country we're talking about here, Chesley, but he also said it's incredibly challenging because in some cases, we're talking about crime syndicates with a lot of moving parts where everybody has a role. It's not just a single person here to blame. Now, we're going to show you more of what he's tracking online and what the data that we got our hands on shows, all in our story.
Liza, in doing the story, did you find that, because it seems like everything is kind of going digital these days, is it an infrastructure thing? Does it cost too much to change things over so the keys become obsolete?
Well, the keys are still being used, but they're trying to roll out these electronic keys, basically. Now, it's not clear how far along in the process they are, and you can kind of understand why the Postal Inspection Agency doesn't want to reveal all of that, because we are talking about a security issue at the end of the day, and there's very few pictures of what these electronic keys look like. But the goal is to have this kind of dual authorization, so it's not just a single key that opens up all of these mailboxes. So again, we're going to get into that in our story, but good question right there, Chesley. It's definitely an ongoing issue, and we're seeing so much of it play out on the dark web. Maimon is really an expert in this field because he can track it, where you and we're not going to see that activity playing out behind the scenes. One
last question for you. The safety of the mail carriers, have they been talking about, or have you gotten any insight on whether they should now be carrying weapons or something like that? I mean, or as a mail carrier, I would be afraid if at any moment I could be attacked, right? Are they talking about that?
Well, we've had some big profile cases, right? In Buckhead, just a couple of months ago, a carrier was robbed in broad daylight, and I understand that, no, they're not armed. Just from watching some of the back and forth between police as they were interviewing these carriers who've been robbed, that's my understanding. Now, again, as we get into this, and you'll see in our story, the Postal Inspection Service would not answer our questions. So there are a lot of questions still out there that we're pressing to get answers to, and I think that's a really good one that you point out, Chesley.
All right, yeah, we're going to bring you back on to talk about this. I'm concerned about my mail carrier, you know?
For sure, yeah.
I want to keep them safe. Liza Lucas, really appreciate your report. Well, it won't be long until hurricane season officially kicks off, but there's plenty of time still for you to prepare and ensure that you're ready for the next storms that may roll through our forecast area. Here now, we are honored to have the director of the National Hurricane Center, Dr. Michael Brennan. Dr. Brennan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi, good to see you.
All right. Now, we know that, let's see, Colorado State came out with their forecast already. You guys come out with yours typically in early May. Any hints on what you can give us as far as what we can expect this upcoming season?
Well, I think, the biggest factor usually that determines how busy an Atlantic hurricane season is going to be is whether there's El Nino in the Pacific or La Nina. El Nino tends to suppress activity. La Nina tends to enhance it. It looks like we're going to have neither heading into this hurricane season. So, but the main message everybody needs to know is that you have to prepare regardless of how busy the season is going to be overall, because it only takes one storm affecting your area to make it a busy season for you. And as many people saw in much of Georgia last year, Helene was a generational storm for many people, and it only takes one storm affecting you regardless of how busy the season is to make it a dangerous situation. So you have to prepare every year.
When we watch coverage of hurricanes coming in, we typically focus on those coastal cities, right? When you're looking at a place like Atlanta, inland, do we need to really start amping up the potential for those kind of dangers around here?
Yeah, you can look at these where the fatalities occurred on this map from Hurricane Helene. And while there were fatalities along the coastline here in Florida, especially down in the Tampa Bay region, the vast majority of the fatalities occurred much farther inland, in fact, hundreds of miles away from where Helene made landfall in portions of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. So those inland threats are certainly real. And if you look at, this is one reason why we introduced the experimental cone graphic last year. This is an example from Helene that shows those hurricane and tropical storm watches and warnings in those inland areas. You can see in this example, the entire state of Georgia is under some type of warning or watch related to tropical storm or hurricane force winds. Much of Florida, much of South Carolina, western North Carolina. So we're doing a better job of trying to convey the threats of those hazards inland. And flash flooding, river flooding from rainfall has always been a substantial inland threat.
What would you say is a good time to people should start preparing as we watch that cone?
You should start preparing now. Again, you want to have those preparations in place before hurricane season starts, before you could potentially be threatened. A lot of the storms that we've seen affect the United States last year, and Helene was no exception, are storms that actually form very close by and make landfall and bring impacts within 3 or 4 days. So Helene formed down here in the Caribbean, moved up into the Gulf, and then made landfall in Florida and was up into Georgia very quickly. So you're not, even for a storm that might threaten you, you may not have 5, 6, 7 days to watch it develop and move across the Atlantic. Sometimes we do get those long track systems that come out of the tropical Atlantic and through the Caribbean, but the trend in recent years has been for stronger storms to develop nearby in the Caribbean and Gulf and then affect us very quickly.
And that's what you mean by know your risk, right? So you got to know your particular area. Yeah. Maybe if you have a lot of trees, then that could be the risk, or if you have flood-prone areas. Is that what you were saying earlier?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Know what your risk is. Some people are vulnerable to multiple hazards. The tree canopy, if you live in a flood-prone area. Obviously, inland portions of Georgia don't have to worry about storm surge, but the Georgia coastline does, and a lot of other places. There's the risk of tornadoes as well that can occur anywhere through a tropical storm or hurricane's wind field. But again, especially if you live in a flood-prone area, that's the one hazard that you might have to leave your home out ahead of. They do call for evacuations of flood-prone areas from freshwater flooding in certain situations. That happened in some places during Helene. And again, know what your home's structural risks are, especially if you live in a mobile home. That can be at risk even in a tropical storm. Those winds can cause damage. Certainly, if you're going to get stronger wind gusts, you may have to leave your mobile home in that situation as well and get to a safer location.
All right, Doc, you told us to start preparing now. What sort of things should we have in our kits, have them ready?
Yeah, emergency kits, you want to have food and water, several days worth of non-perishable food, water, medicine, any prescriptions, again, several days. You want to be prepared to basically fend for yourself for 5, 6, potentially 7 days after an event. There may not be power. You may not be able to easily move around or get access to food, water, or medicine. Keep your gas tank full, especially as a storm is approaching. Keep cash on hand. Make sure you have a battery-powered radio. Make sure you have solar type chargers to charge your mobile devices, your mobile phones, so that you can, again, have all this handy, get it done now ahead of the storm, so that disaster supply kit's just ready to go when you need it.
All right. He is the director of the National Hurricane Center, Dr. Michael Brennan. So glad you joined us this morning, and thank you for all that insight. And next week is National Work Zone Safety Awareness Week, and GDOT is making sure you keep these folks in your sight while you're on the highway, okay? Here now with the latest is GDOT spokesperson and friend of the show, Natalie Dale. Welcome back. Good to see you.
So good to be back. Thanks for having me.
All right, talk to me about these road crews, right? And all this physical labor that they do, the time it takes to get these projects done and get them accomplished. Talk to us about them.
Right. So next week we will be recognizing National Work Zone Safety Awareness Week. And in reality, it's something we should be acknowledging every week. Anytime you get on the road, you need to think about the workers that are out there, whether they are first responders, our hero units, a contractor, a construction worker. These men and women are right on the line of sometimes erratic, high-speed traffic to get their job done. You and I have what we would consider to be a relatively safe office, but that's not necessarily the reality for a maintenance worker that's out there clearing a drain ahead of the storm. And so we see, because work zones move a lot, they shift a lot, they could be different from day to day. We see sometimes within the year high numbers of crashes in work zones and injuries in work zones, not just to our workers, but also to the motorists that drive through them. So we're just going to bring some extra recognition next week with all state DOTs around the country, safety enthusiasts, to make sure that people are really remembering the men and women that are out there on the road doing this hard work.
Natalie, you're so right, so right. But is it that do you think we see so many work zones that they've become a part of the fabric that we drive on? Why do we take them for granted?
I think we take a lot of things for granted. We look down at our phone. April is also, this is a great tie-in, April is also Distracted Driving Awareness Month. We see distracted driving a lot in construction zones. Sometimes we are on autopilot. Sometimes we make the choice to look down at that phone when we know we shouldn't. Sometimes we're going faster than the posted speed limit within the construction zone just because we're running late. There are a lot of things that we can do to cut down on these behaviors in construction zones. Slow down. Know that the construction zone that you drove through yesterday, it might change the next morning because we have shifting lanes, varying conditions. So I always say these are habits you should have on the road anyway. You should obey the speed limit. You should be attentive, but especially in work zones, just because they change often. And you have our crews, whether that's, again, a hero, first responder, right against the edge of traffic. And work zones can be big. I-20, I-285, that's a big work zone. Yeah. But it can also be a small portion of a lane on a local street that's shut down for a pothole repair or something like that. So work zones come in all shapes and sizes. They change from day to day. It requires our utmost attention, our best driving to make sure that everyone gets home safely, our workers and the drivers.
Yeah, I understand this year's theme is respect the zone so we can all get home. What events do you have planned for the week ahead?
Well, we're asking everyone to wear their safety orange on Wednesday. I'm wearing mine today. I'll wash it. It'll be back on Wednesday. But tune into our social media channels. Again, this is something that's celebrated nationwide, so other states are doing things. There's some really compelling videos. We also, because April is Distracted Driving Awareness Month, have an incredible ad that's running on many stations, probably y'all's as well, through Georgia Broadcasting, about an individual who looked down at her phone for 1 second. It changed her life. That message is so important. If she could take back that second, she would. And so we're going to promote safety content next week, as we do every week. We're asking everyone to wear their orange on Wednesday and to really slow down in those construction zones. And if it's the first time you're thinking about it, don't make it be the last. These are very, very important things that we do when we get behind the wheel. So we hope you join us next week in recognition of our workers, those that drive through construction zones, to make sure that we're all staying safe.
I do have an orange tie. I will have it on Wednesday. I'm going to have to put a reminder in my phone. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to help out because everything you said is true, Natalie, and we have to be aware of our friends that also work on the roads, and we have to be aware of our driving at all times so that we stay safe. Thank you for joining us every Friday and letting us know or be aware of what's happening on the roads. Time for my final take, and this is from the files of it could have been a whole lot worse. Yeah, the Ohio State Buckeyes made a visit to the White House to celebrate their national championship, and the usual takes place, like the photo with the president. They present him with a jersey with his presidency number on it. Now this year, Vice President Vance decided to join in. He is an Ohio State graduate, and when it came time to pick up that trophy for the photo, look, he fumbled it. Oh my gosh, he dropped it. Yeah, the question is, was it too heavy for him or was it awkward because it was in two pieces? Either way, we need to put a ban on people who touch the trophy that are non-players. It was sitting on a table, we could have left it right there. For some reason, we feel like we need to hoist trophies above our heads. Well, if you didn't play on the field or play on the court, let's just leave it alone, right? No more lifting trophies above our heads, okay? No more. That's all I have for you today, folks. Try to make it a great day and encourage someone today. We'll see you again tomorrow.